busy executive is faced with some pretty tough decisions, not least of which is which executive car they should choose to adorn their driveway and transport them in style and comfort from one high-powered business meeting to another. The competition for their business is extremely fierce, and the shopping list seems to be growing and growing. The list may be large, but it seems to be dominated by the Germans. Audi's A6 is a sleek and stylish statement. Mercedes-Benz have combined elegance and quality in their C-Class. And of course, top of every executive wish list is 5 Series engineering and performance from BMW. But there's now a neutral country hot on the heels of the Germans. Sweden is going for the executive car market with all cylinders firing. Volvo have always been known for their reliability and safety, but now they're also doing well in the design stakes thanks to the S70's handsome lines. And the latest attack from the land of snow and vodka has come from Saab in the shape of the 95, the replacement for the 9000, and as the name suggests, the car that Saab hope will lure car buyers away from the BMW 5 Series. Pretty ambitious, but Saab feel that the 95 has what it takes to take it to the top of the executive chart. There are 3 models to choose from. Top of the range is a 3-litre V6, there's a 2.3 litre, and this, the entry-level 2 litre at £22,000. But this is the slightly more luxurious SE model, and that'll set you back 24.5 grand on the road. But hang on just a minute before you sign the cheque. There's a few things to add to that. £1,220 for the 4-speed automatic gearbox. Leather seats, £1,150. A Saab driving pack with cruise control for £510. And for the luxury of keeping your posterior warm on those cold winter mornings, a cheque for £230 for heated seats. Bringing you to a grand total of just under £28,000. Wow, enough to put you behind the driving seat of a very well-equipped 5 Series or even the Mercedes CLK. So the Saab isn't cheap, but if you can do away with the extras, like the leather and the warmth for your posterior, then you do get a good list of standard equipment. To name but a few, there's driver, passenger and side airbags, electric windows and mirrors, air conditioning, a steering wheel that adjusts for both height and reach, and an excellent stereo. The feeling here inside the cabin is that everything has been designed for people who spend an awful lot of time behind the wheel. Saab, of course, are famed for the comfort of their seats, and work with orthopaedic specialists at the design stage has ensured that these are as comfortable as your favourite armchair. The instrument panel is typically sarved, curving around the driver, putting everything within easy reach. One particularly nice touch is that the instrument panel can be dimmed at night, so it doesn't distract the driver on those long, tiresome journeys home. The driver does have plenty of space, as does the passengers, and there's an awful lot of luggage room for those executive briefcases and other stuff. All around the car are plenty of cubby holes, there's even a map holder, and of course the obligatory cup holders. A couple of irritating points with a rather poor visibility in my particular driving position, and the sound of the indicators that drove me absolutely mad. On the face of it, the 95 doesn't look strikingly different to its predecessor, but the changes are ones that you feel rather than see. General Motors have done a deal with Saab to supply the chassis for the 95. It's based on the Vauxhall Vectra, but Saab engineers have adapted it so that it puts the Vectra's ride and handling to shame. The 95 is smooth and supple and handles well on most roads, but it is a bit let down on sharp bends where it feels rather front heavy and suffers from body roll. The 95's engine range has been updated from the old 9000s. Both the 2 and the 2.3 litres get their power from 4 cylinders and a light pressure turbo. And Saab call their engines Eco-Power, standing for ecology, economy and power. And power it certainly has. There's plenty of torque and the engine really doesn't have to be revved too hard to respond. Good soundproofing ensure that the engine stays quiet, giving you a smooth and a relaxing ride. But what lets the ride down is the automatic gearbox, which just doesn't seem to work in harmony with the engine. It seems to lunge the car forward as it changes, and the 4 speeds just simply aren't enough. A far better deal is to save yourself the £1,200 and stick to the manual option instead. This is without doubt a car you'd be happy to carry around the family in, as it's just packed with safety features. There's ABS, all-round airbags, anti-submarine seats, a head restraint to protect you from whiplash, side impact protection, and there are no less than 8 patented safety features on it. The Saab 9.5 is a well-equipped and comfortable car. It's practical and it's safe. It has a powerful, refined engine. You know that buying the 9.5 would be a sensible choice. It's a car that wouldn't let you down. But it's just not very exciting. It's extremely unadventurous, and it suggests that the kind of person who chooses to buy a 9.5 is a bit boring. The Saab 9.5 will give the 5 Series a run for its money, until it gets to the one point that sits at the top of every executive's wish list: image. You can't help feeling that instead of high-powered business meetings and a fast track to the top, the 9.5 is heading for an early retirement and afternoons on the golf course.
You'd think that with little other good news coming out of Rover at the moment, that their heads might be elsewhere rather than improving on a success story by introducing the new Land Rover Discovery. But here it is, and in a showroom just about near you now. The all-new Land Rover Discovery, which looks just like the other one. To be fair, this is partly the result of an owner's survey, which said we like the styling, but improve the road handling and the build quality. And so what you get is this. It's very hard to tell the two apart. A U-shaped surround to the front grille, that's an obvious one. An extra 5 inches body length gives more space in the back and a more balanced look. It's also slightly wider, which makes it beefier and improves stability. And new, higher, larger tail lights. Well, clearly the new version isn't designed to turn heads, so you'll have to persuade people that it was worth paying the 7% or so extra because it's a much classier drive. And to test that theory, well, we'll just have to drive them both at the same time. Land Rover first introduced the Discovery as a seriously professional all-rounder, smooth and comfortable in town and on motorways, with superb off-road capabilities to compete with anything else around. And it largely succeeded. OK, much of Middle England thought it was just the thing for popping the kids down to school and never found out what that second little gear shift was for, but most serious owners were generally happy on the whole, and Land Rover received plaudits from the motoring press. Now, I'd never driven a Land Rover Discovery before these two brutes landed up in my drive, and the first thing you notice is just how high the driver's position is. Land Rover call this the command position, presumably because you get a commanding view. And what's more, the horizon expands even further at the touch of a button. Going up. Whoa! I can see Surrey from up here. But then again, we are in Surrey. A good way to test the handiness of the layout of the cabin controls is to drive any car for the first time at night, so you can grope your way around and feel whether things are where they should be. And one thing I couldn't find were those seat controls, which is on the central console here. And one thing that I'm not keen on at all is the position of the door handle, which is well forward and down quite a long way, and that hasn't been changed on the new version, but it is a bit of a minor quibble. The old version is perfectly comfortable, but this one is even better, with a larger windscreen, which allows me to see even more of Surrey from my leather-bound perch. Also, an obvious add-on are these armrests, fully adjustable and a very good idea. Electronic gizmos abound here too. There's, for instance, his and hers matching digital heat controls, and 2 new buttons here which activate some important new improvements. For instance, this one is your hill descent control. This switch jacks the back of the car up on self-levelling air springs to give you extra clearance over boulders and whatever off-road. Or if you want to lower your rear end onto a tow hitch to connect up to your powerboat or glider. And then there's this that everyone talks about. It's a curry hook, somewhere to hang your takeaway on. They've thought of everything. Both Discoveries seat 7, but with not the sort of legroom that you'd expect in an MPV back there. And although my kids loved the side-facing rearmost seats, they're not really practical for adults, and the owner's survey wanted those changed. So the new rearmost seats are forward-facing, with superbly clever drop-down headrests. There's still not a lot of legroom, although you can take your mind off those sore knees by tuning into your own choice of radio station. Garfunkel in the front for Mum and Dad, and garbage in the back. Both versions of the Discovery I'm driving have comparable power units on the surface, but they're very different underneath. This is the old 3.9 litre automatic V8 injection, which does 0 to 60 in a respectable 11 seconds, but has an alarming combined MPG of just 17. Gulp. It's supposed to be slightly quicker and more frugal on the fuel too, which is good news. It's definitely more responsive, the power-assisted braking works really well, and is it me, or does it have a tighter turning circle than the old version too? It certainly feels like it. For a start, they've stiffened up the chassis, which now has an extra cross member, and they've introduced steering improvements, which make the car handle much more responsively, like a smaller car. But the ace in the hole, as far as this car is concerned, is precisely that. ACE, or Active Cornering Enhancement. Landrover told us that one of the most significant developments on the new Discovery is its ACE. And no, they weren't criticising the old Discovery, well, they wouldn't, would they? But one snipe often levelled at the outgoing model was that it pitched and rolled through corners, a corollary of its excellent off-road ability. The engineer's aim was to provide car-like handling without sacrificing the off-road ability Land Rover owners have come to expect. The answer? ACE, or Active Cornering Enhancement. Lateral acceleration is detected by body-mounted sensors, and the information fed to the system computer. The computer assesses the situation and decides whether you're flying along your favourite A-road or going completely mad off-road. An engine-mounted pump provides the pressure required for roll control modules, which counteracts body roll and stiffens suspension movement. And having ACE rather than conventional anti-roll bars allows for lower rate springs, giving maximum articulation off-road and passenger rise comfort. The system senses what's needed. As a result of this technology, the new Discovery carves up bends much better than before. The car doesn't roll as much through corners either, and the electronic roll control is designed to cut in and out unnoticed. As for safety features, well, airbags abound in both models, but I am very surprised how thin and tinny the doors are. They don't seem to be too protective, although sitting up here I suppose the only thing that's going to broadside you is a lorry or another Land Rover. And in any case, the aluminium doors on this old version have been replaced by steel ones, which will at least help to prevent dings. Well, Rover need to sell between 60 and 70,000 of these a year, and whereas the entry-level price is about £25,000, by the time you've got to this top-of-the-range V8 version, you're looking at £35,000 with extras on top of that. In its class, it's a class act, and Rover will be keeping their fingers crossed that their middle-class buyers aren't hit by that other nasty discovery, an economic recession.
It's quite difficult to place Subaru in any particular niche as a manufacturer. They've long been the farmer's friend. Their rugged estates and pickups are as much part of the pastoral scene as apple trees and global warming. But you're just as likely to see a Subaru being thrown violently at that self-same scenery by a rally driver, beloved as the Impreza is, of course, by rally drivers the world over. It could be said that picking on rally drivers and farmers is a bit limiting when it comes to selling large numbers of cars and making any money. But then again, if your numbers to sell are limited by artificial import restrictions anyway, it makes no difference. You can afford to be a bit specialist. Pitched against the Audi A6 Avant and BMW 5 Series in estate form, the new Subaru Legacy estate is exactly that, entirely new, designed from scratch. The floor pan and body all designed from scratch, with one purpose: to be the best handling load lugger on the market at any price. First thing you'll notice, an entirely new face and a much stronger face for it. And that's very deliberate. The Japanese designers said that they feel that is a generic weakness of Japanese cars, and I think it does give the car much more of an image. The external dimensions remain pretty much exactly the same, give or take a millimetre or two here and there. Any significant increase would have compromised the handling that this car's all about. But it is still in a state, and that boot space is enormous and surprisingly uncluttered. There's no turret intrusion from the suspension, and that's because of something called boomerang suspension. I don't know about boomerangs, but there are two things you do expect to find in any Subaru, and they are that horizontally opposed flat 4 boxer engine, in this case a 2.5 litre unit, pretty heavily reworked, doing its stuff up front, and the all-wheel drive system. In the case of the Subaru Legacy, it splits the power 50-50 between the front and rear. I think it's a slight bias towards the rear with the automatic version. And that is until things get a little bit tricky, in which case it'll then send the power and the torque to whichever axle is currently hanging on with any degree of grip. Subaru are proud of the fact that their four-wheel drive system is pretty simple, and it is, certainly compared to some of the big complex four-wheel drivers. That's partly because of the compact nature of the little boxer engine meant they've been able to optimise the layout, and they say that means there's less power lost along the drivetrain. However, if you do want to be complicated, there is a slightly more complicated option available to you, and that's got the simple name VDC. Okay, so you could say there's no shortage of all-wheel drive cars on the market, even with traction control as well. But Subaru say that their VDC, Variable Dynamic Control System, is a little bit different. It's fitted to some versions of the Subaru Legacy, and for a start it means that the torque is biased towards the rear. It's split 35-65 on cars with it fitted. That means it's going to have some of the characteristics of a rear driver, which means more fun. The car can be balanced and adjusted mid-corner on the throttle. It makes for a much more fun drive, but to reassure us, Uncle VDC is always there watching over to make sure if things get a little bit tricky, hopefully they can be sorted. There are sensors at each corner of the car. They can detect movement, they can detect sudden movement, even sudden steering input, G-forces from front to rear and side to side, constantly monitoring what's going on. And with all that information to hand, it means that VDC can step in and, if necessary, sort out the mess that you got everything into in the first place. There's a quality feel to the interior. It's pretty well equipped. We've got cruise control, automatic air conditioning with an economy mode, which is rather neat. Leather, obviously, on the steering wheel and seats. And the fit and finish is pretty good. The switches feel great. The switch gear is nicely integrated. There's a few nice touches. I like this chrome gate on the rather smart automatic gearbox. I also like this. It's the only car I've ever seen with a bear trap fitted as standard. But if you want something a little less executive and a little bit more rugged, then I think I might be able to help you there. Come here, I'm going to show you something a bit special. This is a one-off. I'm serious. This is probably the sexiest, maybe the horniest thing you're going to see this year. There are members of the farming community who can't sleep at night for thinking about this. If they do get to sleep, they have those odd, swirling, sweaty dreams and wake up with that funny feeling in the pit of the tummy that says, well, you know what it says. It's here. Look at this. Farmer's paradise. I'm not kidding. The Outback, if you're a farmer, is Naomi Campbell, Michelle Pfeiffer, an EU subsidy and a Norfolk Saddleback all rolled into one delightful package. It's an even more complex beast, if you like, than the previous car, because this strives to be the best handling estate on the road that can also go off the road a bit. Underneath, there's actually very little different about this car from the other one. It's the same basic package, but it's been put on these semi-off-road, chunky-ish tyres, raised a little tiny bit on its suspension, and it's got these butcher macho plastic side mouldings all over it. All in all, to a farmer, This is, well, sex on a stick, let's be absolutely honest. Subaru had sussed this years ago. Farmers have been buying Subarus for this reason for years. And basically what they're saying is your average 4x4 is too big, too bulky, and a lot of old rubbish on the road. This, they say, is the solution. Get a big practical estate car, raise it up a little bit, and for most uses, and face it, if farmers can put up with it, you and I probably can, it's fine. Just think about it. I mean, who's got it right? At a time when Landrover are releasing the likes of the Freelander and the new Discovery, and there's all the other rash of huge great 4x4s on the market, Subaru is saying, well, I don't think you've got it right. Why take an enormous great 4x4 built car designed to go off-road in the most arduous of circumstances and give it some modest on-road ability? Subaru is saying, no, we're going to take a car that handles fantastically on the road and give it a degree of off-road ability, certainly enough to meet the needs of most of us. If a car is going to spend 90% of its time on the road, why sacrifice nearly 100% of its on-road ability just to satisfy those few occasions when you need incredible axle articulation and the ability to go up and down in possibly steep hills? Most of the time, all you need is something that's going to be able to deal with a bit of a muddy slope, carry a load of people in their luggage, and if the weather turns grotty, stay on the road. To my money, to do that, you don't need something capable of crossing a war zone. The Subaru Legacy and the Outback version go on sale in the UK in December. Prices aren't yet officially known, but the unofficial inside line is expect something like between 20 and 26,000, depending upon the trim level and the specification. Subaru don't expect to sell these in their millions in the UK. They can't get hold of them in that number anyway. But if it does nothing else, it raises one very good question. Surely it's as valid to take an on-road car and make it reasonably competent off-road as ever it is to take an off-road car and make that reasonably competent on-road.